Okay, we're rolling. Naruto, DevRel at Avail. Welcome.
Hey guys, how's everything going? Hey Peter.
Hey, excited for this one. We wanted to take a very specific approach to this call, this interview, focus on developer relations and really marketing specifically to developers, which is such a difficult thing to do, but such an important thing for projects in crypto. Um, as a developer relations person, like how'd you get into the role?
hmm
And are you a developer yourself?
Yeah, I am. So just to introduce a little bit, I got first exposed to crypto back in 2017 when I was still in college. My roommate comes into my room and he's like, "Oh, do you know what Bitcoin is?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. I've heard about it, but I've never done." And he's like, "Oh, it's like stock. It's going up, you know." So we were like, "Sure, we'll put in," and we bought in some crypto or like some Bitcoin. At that time, it was $3,000, I think. And then I got addicted to it, so I kept on buying more and more, and it was kind of fun. 2019 crashed, lost money, but I never sold crypto. I still held on to it. And then 2020 was like when I started like looking into Solidity, Ethereum, Bitcoin itself, and that's when I got into like the development. So I am a software engineer. I worked in Web 2 for 3 years before moving to crypto full time at Avail. And I was also working on the side from like, freelance projects, NFT contracts, DeFi contracts, that kind of stuff.
That's cool. How'd you hear about Avail?
So I actually met founders at a conference, and they were actually speaking at a conference that I hosted. So it was pretty fun. It was actually Prabal from Avail, then it was Mustafa from Celestia, and then another project called Powerloom. So they all three shared a panel, and that's where I was, like I knew about what Avail is because DA layer and Celestia was really good back then. I was, I was looking into DA layers. I was looking into infrastructure because I was getting deep into the infra tech as well. So that's how I found. And then Trouble was like, "Oh yeah, why don't you work with us?" So that's how it all started.
Nice, nice. Well, you're very active on X, and I imagine that that's a has been a good channel for you to reach developers. And we're going to talk about where developers hang out, how to reach them, what types of messaging works, and we'll get into that. But maybe we can first talk about, I guess, crypto projects that want to grow through developers or developers that build on them or applications that build on them. Like, it's such a noisy space. How to best attract developers?
Mhm. Sure.
Maybe
Yeah. So I think I'll first introduce a little bit about Avail, and then I'll introduce on what tactics that we are using,
okay.
specifically because Avail is a DA layer. It's a unification layer, but at the base or the first product that we have is a DA layer.
So
Um,
DA is data availability. Okay, go ahead.
Yes,
Yeah.
DA is the data availability. And what basically it means, very basic terms, is that you need decentralization. And then Ethereum has this, modular approach where you can separate out DA with other parts of the layer, of other parts of the architecture. So you're basically just posting all your data that you would post on Ethereum mainnet to directly to Avail or any DA solution so that the cost for your rollup is cheap. That is a very basic thing as a dealer, but we have multiple things that we're working on. Essentially, we call ourselves unification layer. What it means is that we are working on something called Avail Nexus, which is an interop solution. So think of like, there are ZK chains, for example, ZK Sync. Sorry, there's a chain on ZK Sync, for example, SOFON, and then there's Abstract, right? Two different chains. The crazy part about all of this is that there can be an NFT on Abstract, and I have Ethereum or any kind of token on SoFi. Now I want to buy that NFT. So there's going to be a mechanism where the interop happens without me bridging out my assets to SoFi from Abstract, and then go through that bridging process and all that. So we're just trying to make the UX better, liquidity better, so that anyone building on top of Avail Nexus, they can just click on one tab and then buy from any chain possible, right? So this is our second product, Avail Nexus. It's going to be live very soon on testnet. We're working on very great POCs. We have a devnet internally running as well, where I can like buy an NFT from chain one and then transfer it to chain two, even though my assets or my ETH is on chain two. So that means that I don't need to bridge out to chain one and then like order that transaction. The third product is Avail Fusion, which is a staking mechanism, but it includes Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum. So you can stake all different assets alongside Avail. Generally, in a chain ecosystem or any kind of place, you can only stake that certain native token, right? For example, let's say some Bitcoin L2, right? So I'll be only staking Bitcoin L2 or Bitcoin, but I cannot do with Solana or Ethereum. So that's the biggest difference that we're trying to do. Now the problem, and coming back to the very initial question, how we attract these developers, right? The problem is that Avail and many other infra projects are very low level tech. So it gets harder for us to acquire these talented devs because a lot of the devs in the ecosystem are basically dev developers. And then there are only few developers who are actually protocol engineers or who are blockchain engineers who know what goes behind everything, every transaction, or what a data layer is, or what are intents, that kind of stuff, right? Um, so there are different approaches that we use at Avail on how to acquire these developers. And then there are different approaches that are being used by chain ecosystems, for example, Monad, Pega ETH, Eclipse, similar, but they have different approaches as well because their target audience is dApp developers and our target audience is protocol slash blockchain slash infra devs.
And no, I'm glad you segmented that out, because we tend to talk in generalities. Like when we say developers, it's very generic, right? But then there's Web 2 developers, then there's Web 3 developers, and then in the crypto space there's protocol engineers, there's dApp developers, and so it's important to segment all that out. Um, how did you come across across that the specific segmentation that makes sense for Avail?
Um, so a lot of people think hackathons are a solution to go to, right? ETH Global, Encode, a lot of these. But we consistently figured it out that these developers are not going to be, the main target audience. And nothing like, no offense on them, they're still in learning phase. So there's a long way for them to keep building. So for me, my target audience would be actual blockchain developers who want to start their own companies, who want to be builders, and they come up with a solution, let's say, to launch an L2 or launch an SVM with Avail, right? Or they're building some interop solution with Intents or ERC7683, which is an intent specific EIP, and they come up with a solution that can be leveraged by Nexus, or they can leverage Nexus, right? So there's a very big difference on how you have to source these people. Accelerators, or incubators are a really great idea where people can come in and they're like, oh, this is what we're building. This is how we are going to build. And then it's on you, your organization, on how the best you can support these people.
Mm-hmm. And this is very interesting, because I've always viewed hackathons as really very, very top of the funnel. And and like you said, some of them are going to be ready to build and start their own companies. Many won't. Most of them are still just learning. Um, and based on kind of my experience at having gone to 20 plus ETH global events, I've actually been very surprised, pleasantly surprised, that a lot of the attendees are Web 2 devs that are just getting into Web 3,
Mm-hmm.
which is so good, because we want to grow the pie. But at the same time, for projects like Avail, that might not be the target audience that's ready to build on Avail or use the offerings that Avail has.
Mhm.
When was the time you kind of realized that that might be the case, that maybe these hackathons aren't don't have like the right characteristics of developer that we need right now?
Mhm. I think so. I'm a big fan of Eat Global. A lot of like my journey started with that. I love Karthik and his team.
Hmm.
But then, we sponsored most of these hackathons last year, and I think first 2 or 3 hackathons we realized that the developers that we are talking to, even if they're not, new to the ecosystem, they're still building dApps, which doesn't really, affect uh, Avail directly. So that's what a big realization, and we wanted to like pursue on what we can do, because like we are already here, we are going to be at other events as well. So what can be changed here? So my general approach was to identify the hackers who've been into ecosystem for 2 3 years, and now they're looking to build their own project, own company, or it can be completely different, and that would be like, okay, you tested our product, give us a feedback. How did you find the docs? You know, what did you find the best? What can we improve? So these are like the two parts where you can do. Essentially, one last thing. This is what I believe is that if you see from 2017 to 2024, every hackathon boasts about how a big company came out of that hackathon. 1inch, or I think there were some more, I can't remember, but 1inch was one of them, right?
Hmm.
So the problem is that you have to host multiple different hackathons across like multiple years, but then you only get one unicorn, right? So hackathon should not be the main place where you attract devs to start a company, but hackathons is a place where you can identify who's here for the long term, and you can support them the best.
I remember that. So I think Kartik and Jacob and team at ETH Global, they're great.
Mhm,
I've been a volunteer at a couple of. In fact, when I first entered crypto back in
mhm,
late 2016, early 2017, I was a volunteer at ETH San Francisco, and that's when I got I think the bug. I was became just enamored with the whole process and the and in the community, and it was just so fun. Um, and I remember in you mentioned 1inch. I think that came out of ETH New York, and I think I was at that one also. And I remember when they presented and was just fascinated by DeFi and how they became they demonstrated this aggregator on top of multiple dexes, and it was really just kind of very um, innovative. And but you're exactly right, though. There's very few kind of projects that come out of hackathons that are, um, if we view these hackathons as a funnel, very few actual projects come out of the bottom of the funnel. But many can become incubated over years. And as you mentioned, as you attend these hackathons, you'll see kind of the same names and faces over and over and over again. And it sounds like that becomes your target market, is like, okay, these developers have been to these hackathons and they continue attending these hackathons. At some point, they're going to be ready to build their own roll up or L2. That's when it makes sense for, that becomes your target for Avail.
yes, for sure.
So how do you reach these? Because, Avail and every crypto project is permissionless, right? How do you reach them? Like, how do you identify, okay, this
Mhm.
is the type of developer that is ready to build on Avail? Um, how do
Yes.
you identify them?
Okay, so one thing that I've realized in last 1 year is that hacker houses really work. Um, when you're at a hackathon as big as Eat Global, there are multiple partners, and you only have 2 days, and then these hackers who may be new, may not be new, but are dev developers. They're looking into bounties, the easiest bounties they can get, right?
Mhm.
And they have a low time limit. So it becomes very hard for them to build something on a wheel, even though we've received some really great projects. Um, and because of that, I pivoted to an idea of hacker houses. We hosted one at HCC. We hosted one in Denver. So we have done two so far, and we got a really good um, feedback on how we did it, what we did, and from these two hacker houses, we were able to get all of these steps to build on Avail for 7 days. They built some really great projects, and we have two teams coming from these hacker houses to build their own product as well,
Mm.
right? So that's what I think really matters on how much focus you can give in the span of 2 to 7 days whenever you're interacting with these devs. And that's why these hacker houses work, because in a hacker house, everyone is logged in, sitting in their room or in the living room, coding, talking about the ideas. When I did the Eat Denver one, I was very, not conflicted, but I was also very confused on how it's going to work out, because we've never met these devs, how it's going to all, look like for them, what are they going to build. But the minute everyone started coming and they checked in, they're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm building. Someone was building like a token launchpad. Someone was building a game, and they all were like, okay, yeah, we can launch on Avail, we can launch on any L2, or someone came up with a fast finality layer at HCC. So these things really matter, because now you're giving direct feedback, and you're having conversation for 2 hours straight. My head of product was in there. Our solutions engineering team was in there, and everyone was having a good conversation on what can be done, what is good, what can be removed, that kind of stuff. And this is just a hacker house side, right? There are multiple other ways where you can go and target devs. Um, Discord being one of them. And how do you get is like, we have our own Discord. There's a lot of devs in there, and everyone comes in and they're like, oh yeah, we're building this. How do we reach out to the team? And that becomes a major thing. And then the third thing, and I think this is particular for me or anyone else, is we need to have a strong personal brand on Twitter, because we DevRels are the face of the company, or the first line of the company. If founders are busy, founders have too many things to deal with every single day. My founders, Prabal and Anurag, they are like in multiple different conversations. So I cannot like have developers talk to them. So I need to build that reputation in the market that, hey, I'm a DevRel and a wheel, or I'm a DevRel, or I'm a dev, and then this is what you can reach out to me for. And people, every single day, I get 10 messages on Twitter itself. Some people want to build on a wheel, some people want to pitch an idea, and I can give them feedback. It's not necessary that they have to build an a wheel to reach out to me. I can just, have an honest conversation, give my feedback, give my insights, and that's how you build that reputation among the developers. So when you do that constantly for few months, few years, people talk. People are like, oh yeah, you go to Naruto, and he's gonna, talk about your product. He's gonna give you feedback, and then at that moment, I'll realize, does their project align with Avail's values or not? If they do, then I pitch them that, hey, this is what we are doing. If you're interested, you can build on Avail as well. So it's a long process.
Yeah. No, I like that. I also like the long-term approach, because it's, the long view is always what's, that's kind of what matters in the end. How let's go back to the Hacker House format, because uh, I've seen different formats, right? I've seen the weekend hackathon from ETH Global. I've seen, Coliseum does a on the Solana side. Coliseum does a, I think, a um, month long virtual hackathon.
Yes,
I think ETH Global's also done some virtual hackathons, and then there's the Hacker House approach, um, which I believe many. I think the Solana team has also done that across the globe.
yes.
Um, in Salt Lake City, Solana recently did a like a
Mountain Dog.
yeah, Mountain DAO, and so
Cool.
I'm curious about these formats and like what works, and would love to hear more about the Hacker House. Like, first of all, like, once as a team, Avail's decided that it wants to do a Hacker House. How do you get the message out to developers? How do
Mhm.
you get them to register or sign up for the Hacker House? And I guess what are the once they are at the Hacker House, what does the format look like as a developer?
Mhm.
Do,
Okay. So I think the number one marketing is Twitter. You know, you post it on Twitter, you put it on Luma, and then you have multiple different websites like Crypto Nomads or the official, let's say, Eat Denver's, calendar. So you put your event over there. But then there are other channels where you can channel your Hacker House as well. Number one being you need to recognize who is going to be a great partner for this specific or a co-host or a sponsor. So,
mm,
for example, at Eat Denver, we had Avail, SoFon, and then we had Space and Time, which is a great L2. They have great experience, and I think it's backed with by Microsoft, so they're integrating with Avail very soon. Then there was SoFon, Space and Time, Wormhole. All these different we had like 6 to 7 partners, so I can't remember all of them. But the point was that they all aligned on this specific house. We call it Unification House
mm,
because the bounties or the theme was on, similar to this, on like how you can make something using Wormhole, where you can bridge your assets through Base, Solana, or whatever you like, right? So recognize the partners. Now use these partners channels to reach out to the hackers. If I send it to the DevRel of Wormhole, like, hey, this is what I found, and she's, by the way, a very nice person. I think her name's Paul, and she's very knowledgeable DevRel. And I just sent her this, like, oh yeah, you're partner of, Avail's Hacker House. How about you share it with your community? So they share it with their community. So Wormhole devs or people building on Wormhole know this, and then I reached out to Sofon, which is an L2 on ZK Sync stack. So they're really great people, really stacked team, and their first roll up that went mainnet with Avail. So they're very close partners of ours. And I said the same thing, like you have such a big dev community. How about you like spread it there? So now you're getting applications from multiple ecosystems, not just Avail, right? And that's the thing. Like when you want to market not just for yourself, but your partners, and
mm.
you want to bring in the partner ecosystem to your ecosystem as well.
Now, is the format does it include a kind of like a you mentioned a bounty. So
Mhm.
I imagine if you're a developer and you're building on Wormhole plus Sofon plus Avail, like would they qualify for like a bounty from all three projects? Is that how
Yes,
okay.
exactly. So how it went down, the general idea was that it was a 7 day, I think 6 day long hacker house. We had 15 hackers with us. Everyone, like everyone was sharing a room. There were 8 rooms. It was a big house. And every day they have to check in with me or with our solutions engineer on what they're building, what's the progress look like. And then there were bounties from multiple different projects. Avail has their own bounty on Avail Nexus and Avail DA. Sophone had their own bounties. Wormhole had a bounty to integrate Avail and then work with stuff. Um, Space and Time had their own bounties as well. So basically, everyone has their own bounties, and people are free to choose whatever. And people can also kind of tag it with other
Mhm.
projects. Like there was someone who built it with Sofon, but they also launched it using Wormhole. So that means that now you're targeting two bounties, you qualify for both of them, and you give feedback to the users, sorry, the companies that this is what we get stuck on, and this is what the problem was. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Uh, I love that approach. And one, I obviously at these ETH global events, there's a kind of a similar approach with bounties, with developers trying to qualify for multiple bounties from sponsors. One challenge that I've seen with that approach is you often get projects or applications that are kind of superficial, that are just
Hmm.
bounty hunters. They're just trying to get you know, they're just trying to get a bounty from as many sponsors as possible. And then after the event, they kind of move on and they don't take things seriously. How do you filter out the teams that are serious versus the ones that are just there for the bounty?
Sure. Um, So it comes down to DevRel, me and Robin, who is another DevRel at Avail, and it comes down to us on how we want to select it. But essentially, when we closed the applications for our unification house of Denver, we had over 300 applications.
Hmm.
Um, Out of 300, like 100 were non-residents, so that means that they just want to come and visit the hacker house, and then 200 were the hackers who wanted to stay with us and build with us. Now it's me and Robin, just two guys versus 200 people. So we are going every single GitHub, we are going every single Twitter, and we're checking on what's their mentality, how long they've been in crypto, what they have built. I have personally checked so many GitHubs and I've checked every single line of code as well sometimes because I'm like, okay, is it a good code or is it just one command? Is it just a folder? Just a repository? What is it, right? What they have built in previous hackathons, does it actually work or not? you know so there's a lot of due diligence that goes into this because you're spending real money for people to stay at a hacker house, to have the groceries paid off and all those different things. So a lot of research goes into this. And then there are always questions like, okay, what are you building? What do you want to build? Do you want to keep it long term or not? All these different kind of questions. And every now and then, of course, you receive people who are just bounty hunters or who do not want to continue. But the goal should always be look for those 5 to 6 people out of 15 people. So that's close to 30-40% um, on will they build something long term or not. I got 6 people from the unification house who want to build something on Avail, and I'm in constant touch with them right now after 2 months of general getting over on like what they can build, how they should build, where we can support, where other L2s or other partners can support. So it's a big thing. There are bounty hunters for sure, but there's a lot of due diligence that's go into accepting people.
It sounds like I mean, you've done a lot of due diligence, you and the team. So you had 300 applications and then 100 were non-residents. And
Yes.
so you had to do due diligence on 200 applicants.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And you went into their GitHubs, and I imagine you probably, and then from the
Twitter. Yeah.
Twitter, and probably from the 200, then you do another cut of maybe, let's say, 100, and then
Yes.
you probably talk to
Yes.
individual interviews probably at that point.
Yes.
Okay.
You also need to talk to people individually.
Hmm.
If like you select, let's say, 5 people who are like really good. There are always going to be 5 to 10 people who are really good with a lot of information. Then you conduct interviews for other people who you're not sure about. So that's when you do interviews for other people as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, we did that as well. So it's a lot of time consuming, but at the end of the day, it is very rewarding as well for the company and for yourself.
Now the projects or the team members that attended the hacker house and that you're still in contact with, um, is there a I guess, is there like a grant at the end of this, or you help them with funding for their project? I guess
Mhm.
what's keeping them engaged so that they want to build this application and make sure that they see it through to the end?
Yeah. So we never believed in grants for a long time, and we are um, very cautious on who we give grants to. We don't give grants because there are a lot of people who are extracting the grant ecosystem. you know, be it Gitcoin, be it some other companies, a new chain, for example, people will flock over there and they're like, oh, I want to like build on, for example, Mega ETH. Mega ETH is one of the talk of the town, right? And they're very great people. I'm very close to the team, but everyone is like, they want to build on Mega ETH or Moonat so that they can get grants, right? So we never believed in that. But now we have this plan of like, if there are devs who are really builder mentality and they want to build something, so they can come to us and they can propose what they want to propose, and we will support them with any kind of grants that Avail does. These are like dev grants, but then we also support them with introductions to VCs, introductions to angel investors, introduction to our partner chains, so Sofon, Lens, anyone else, and then they basically, build something with them and Avail, and then it becomes like a joint bounty thing, and then they're finally able to raise that kind of stuff. So we on the in the you know in the on the behind scenes, like behind the scenes, we are helping probably 5 teams right now in raising or like just introductions.
And by the way, that's incredible because like a lot of people don't know, but introductions to VCs and angels, and then dealing with things like just operational logistics
Yep,
type things. It's such a pain for an entrepreneur, and to get some help with that is a huge value add that the Avail team is providing these entrepreneurs. And I think that's one way we really need to kind of reframe the conversation. They're not just developers, they're not just builders, they're actually they're entrepreneurs, they're business
yep,
builders, they're
yep,
building a real business. And I think when we kind of reframe it like that, it takes on a different flavor, and like it just takes on a different kind of worldview, that it's you're not these are not just developers, they're building businesses, and you got to help
yes,
them build their business. um and a lot of building a business is painful stuff like accounting, operations, HR, it's but all of that stuff, even though it's a pain, it also adds tremendous value.
yep.
Okay. No, you on X, you've mentioned a couple of things. Maybe I want to really understand how you are vetting developers or builders, because I think that's one of the key things. I think grants, by the way, they can be good and bad, obviously, and there's a lot of grant hoppers.
Hmm.
Is what I call them. They're similar to kind of bounty hunters, right? But one way to filter out grant hoppers from real builders that are kind of deserving of the grant is to do your due diligence. And so when you're doing due diligence on the projects and the teams and the people behind the applications, I guess, what are you looking for? You've mentioned GitHub, you've mentioned you look at their API usage. I don't know. I guess tell us kind of like some specific things you're actually looking at. GitHub stars, etc.
Yeah, I mean, GitHub and Twitter are definitely like, first thing you would want to look at if it's a North Korean hacker or if it's a real builder.
Hmm.
But then again, there are other things where you would want to put in if they're, like if they're actually building on a wheel, if they are needing a grant, so you get on a call, you get their idea on what they're building, you get the vibes, that really matters to us. We have a really good company culture that we try to preserve, is to keep the vibes up, keep the constructive criticism, positivity up as well internally. So we always get on a call to get and do a check on the vibes, on how everything is going with the other person, what their idea is, why they're excited. Personally, when I have talked to people who are building something, and I'll give you an example, Loomdot, he's a really great guy on Twitter, been in crypto since I think 2014, 2013, whatever. When he speaks to me about his project, his face lit up, you know, it always has this passion when he talks. So that's one way when you're talking to developers or builders on a call, on how excited they are about their project that they're building, because this is going to be their life for 5 years or so, right? Maybe more actually. So it's just number one, that on how a normal call would go with it, apart from all Twitter and GitHub things. Other things that I look for is what they've built in the past, or at least what they've tried to, but they didn't get the right resources. For
Mm.
example, back in 2022, I had a great idea to build on Azuki, similar to like what Anime Chain is right now. but it turns out I didn't have connections back then, so I never could execute, right? But I had the POC, I had everything built out. So I also look into people on what their idea is, what they want to build, what they have done in the past, what their background is. Um, SoFon's founder, Seb, he's a really great guy, and he worked at ZK for I think 3 years or so. Before that, he was at another place, and he had that builder mindset, right? So you can recognize these builder mindset people on their past experiences, how they, talk about their project, what does their GitHub look like if they're devs, all these different kind of things. So it's a mix of everything.
Yeah.
And always like, there's you can always be wrong as well, but at least they pass the first few tests that you set out for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that discipline that you're taking with doing due diligence is so important. It sounds like there's subjective aspects, right? There's,
Yes.
talking to them, hearing from their voice, the excitement in their voice and how their face looks when they talk about their project. And then there's also um those are subjective things, and there's objective things like GitHub stars and other things that they've built in the past. Um okay, no, that I think that's really great because that gives, I think, listeners, those that are in developer marketing, I think, some better ideas. I think a better idea of how they can go about, growing their developer ecosystems and developer networks as they build projects that they represent. Um, when we talked before the call about competitors. So if I'm a developer and I'm looking at, you know, right, let's just use the data availability uh, product right now. If I am in need for a data availability solution, there's
Mhm,
several I could choose from. How
mhm,
do you deal with that situation and make sure that you put Avail in the best light possible, and that the developer
mhm.
chooses Avail or leans towards Avail versus another competitor, let's say?
Yeah. There are some great competitors, for Avail. One crazy thing that not a lot of people talk about is the technical stuff. The people who are actually building on a wheel, the people who are actually, integrating a wheel, they know how effortless it is or how easy it is to be able to integrate a wheel, right? And the one thing that we are very proud of is our customer service, because at the end of the day, a lot of our clients or customers are the businesses, different L2s. And when they're integrating, we make sure that any second they have any question, at least one person is there to answer in the Telegram channel. So anytime we get a question on our Telegram groups, and there are hundreds of them, I have 3 folders of these real chats, and either it's going to be me, Robin, or another solutions engineer, and we're going to be there for like right there if they have any questions on integrating, so that we can provide the live support. You know, someone is integrating with, let's say, someone is building OP stack chain or ZK Sync stack chain, right? And they got into a problem or a bug where they couldn't figure something out. The first thing that I do, I ask for the logs. What's the error? And then this happens in less than 30 minutes. So this is our internal thing, that if you're providing technical support, it should be less than 30 minutes, so that people know that someone is working on it. I ask for everything, and then I try to run on my own system. If I get those problems or not, if I cannot figure it out, then I take it to like a node engineering team or the people who've been working on it for a long time, right? So what's the selling point for Avail is the tech. The tech is way better. Specifically saying that what Avail does is that Avail is actually having a KZG proof commitments. What it means is that anytime a data is posted, there's a KZG commitment, and that is very succinct, very small. So the data availability guarantee is less than a minute or so. There are other DA providers, they have that finality, but it takes them 7 days because they have a fraud proof mechanism similar to OP, right? So the data availability guarantee is late, even though maybe the block finality is less, 10 seconds or whatever. So for Avail, the block finality is 20 seconds, but their data availability guarantee that the block is available is less than a minute. So that's our setting point.
Now, is that done through ZK? How are you able to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So ZK behind it is a lot of something we call KZG commitments or KZG polynomials. It's a whole math thing over there, but we get that, and because of that, we get this low time frame for data availability guarantees. So that's the tech that
Mm,
that is our main selling point. And then another selling point is like every integration for every major protocol is already done. We have CDK integrations, we have ZK Sync integration, OP stack, Arbitrum, Nitro stack, and then we have Dimension as well.
mm.
And it's very effortless. And then the third selling point, as I talked about, was the customer service. Anyone who's trying to integrate, they have any problems, I am online 18 hours a day. So they get an answer in less than 30 minutes from me.
You know, um, I've talked to other developer relations folks about this, but the role of customer service and providing white glove support is
Mhm.
absolutely a game changer. And
Yes.
and in fact, one of the big criticisms against the Ethereum ecosystem is that developers are left to work on their own
Yes.
with very little support. And because of that problem, it's driving people to the Solana ecosystem. And
Yes.
so I think to the extent that Ethereum projects or projects within the Ethereum space can provide more white glove service and better customer service, that's actually going to keep developers in. And it's sounding like that's working really well for Avail.
Yes, exactly. Um, this is the biggest feedback that we get from multiple partners that our tech support is really good. Not just the DevRels, even founders are very active on Telegram. If let's say I'm sleeping, it's nighttime, but it's daytime for them because they're based in Dubai, so they can reply. Or there are multiple employees or like my coworkers who are spread across like India, Europe, Dubai, um, Southeast Asia, so they can reply if our founders are not there or DevRels are not there. But just to make sure that we try to make it acknowledge that your problem has been acknowledged, we are working on it, and we'll give you support by the end of the day.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
And I think that's huge. And again, for listeners, providing white glove support for developers and customer service is absolutely a game changer. Like
Yes,
developers appreciate that so much, both Web3 and also Web2, but Web2 especially since they're just learning. But providing that type of support for developers is huge and creates loyalty. Because imagine if you're a developer, then you're building in an ecosystem and you're getting a lot of support on one, but in another ecosystem, you're left to be on your own with zero support. You're lost. The docs are not structured well. You're gonna go to the one that has
yep,
the least friction
yep,
and providing and if that ecosystem has folks that are willing to help and step in and give you the support you need, like you're gonna stay loyal to that ecosystem.
for sure, exactly. And I think more companies need to do that. That's why I think like DevRel position is really important. But it also has like its own gaps and pitfalls.
Yeah. Let's talk about the DevRel position. How do you work with uh you mentioned brand and which is really important, but I'm curious how the DevRel position works with, let's say, marketing and growth and business development. How does that look like at Avail, and how do you work with each other?
So I think it depends from companies to companies on how they split their DevRels. I've heard of organizations where DevRels are under marketing. I have seen DevRels under solutions engineering, under sales as well. So it completely depends on the KPIs and the goals. For Avail, DevRel sits under product, and product or slash engineering is the same thing. And this is because Avail employees or our head of product or our co-founders, they want us to succeed in the sense that we know what we are talking about when we are talking about two external parties. If I talk to devs every single day, and there are issues that I cannot solve, I would go to engineering team.
Hmm.
But those should be the issues that are very, very deep, which are not easily recognizable, and they're probably a bug in our own system, that kind of stuff. But if I'm talking to independent developers and I'm trying to explain them what Avail does, um, I'm trying to show them how the documentation work, how they can build basic things, how can they can fetch the data, how they can, submit the data to Avail. These are very basic things, and I need to know these. And that is why we sit under the product, because I need to be knowing how to code. I need to be knowing how to sell, but to developers, and to talk to developers, I need to know their language, right? So both the DevRels, me and Robin, we both are devs first, and then we are rels. That's what we call ourselves. Um, but it definitely depends on the company, their KPIs, on where a certain DevRel should sit. To me, I genuinely think that DevRel should be in under product or engineering, kind of same thing, but they should be under that. And then they should be helping the marketing team, like how Robin and I do. Robin and I, we used to do a lot of events as well before, until we hired someone for events manager full-time role, so that we don't have too much pressure. And we also put in a lot of thoughts on marketing, because we are talking to devs. So our official account also needs to be talking to devs or someone else, right? So we put in our thoughts. We are attending the meetings from marketing team. We are attending the calls with the content team on what should be pushed out. So a lot of things are very cross um, cross ecosystem, or sorry, cross
Hmm.
teams. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think sitting under product actually makes a lot of sense because when you're under product, you take on a different view, right? It's not just about developer relations, but it's also the developer experience, which is absolutely critical. Marketing cares about the developer experience. Business development cares about developer experience.
Mhm.
Engineering, I think they do care about the developer experience, but their approach to it is a little different.
Yes.
Um, and I think product is definitely the right place for a developer relations role. And you're right; it's very cross-functional. Um, and content, of course, matters in terms of attracting the right people who are asking the right questions, and then making sure that your content answers that for them. Um, uh, which brings me to my next question in terms of like content. Um, how do you decide on the types of content to create that attracts developers? And how do
Hmm.
you work with a content team on that?
Um, okay. So that's a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna give you out my secrets, right? One thing definitely that works if you want that personal brand, or you want to be known among the developers on crypto Twitter, is to post about what the Twitter is talking about. You know, if the meta of the week is Mega ETH, then I'm gonna be building or looking on some technical things about Mega ETH. Uh, 3 months, 4 months back, the meta was AI agents. So Robin, or another DevRel, he came up with a video on how to launch your own AI agents using Eliza. So that's one of the golden rules, is that you talk about the things that are happening on Twitter right when it happens on Twitter. Not a day late, not a day before, exactly then.
Mm.
If you have something very important, then that's okay. But if you have at least an hour of free time, then you go and research on what the market is talking about, and then you put your thoughts out as a developer of what you think about Monad, Mega ETH, another Unichain or Uniswap or any kind of DEX or whatever like people are talking about. So that's one of my biggest alpha. If someone wants to kind of copy that and learn from it. Second content that we do is on how you can build on a wheel. And this requires, like a lot of our own testing, a lot of time on what can be built, how much time does it take to, build something. So Robin created another video, and he's like a video guy because he does it way better than I can. Um, he built a video or he made a video saying DYOR, deploy your own rollup, you know, and you can make your own rollup or deploy your own rollup on Arbitrum stack in less than 15 minutes. It's on YouTube. A lot of people liked it. We put it on Twitter as well. We got a lot of inflows through that. So the content should always be Avail specific on what can be built so that the developers can take something from them, learn from it, and then launch it. But then content should also be anything that is not Avail specific, because that's where, like a lot of people see your real talent and then they get attracted to you as, some great developer. And then they will see what Avail is, and then from there you can onboard them. So the basic idea is like you try to build those relations not specifically through Avail, but your own knowledge.
I I think that strategy is really tried and true. I think, if you think back in early days of kind of inbound marketing with HubSpot, that's exactly their approach. And, you just
Mhm.
create really good top of the funnel content, which is very generic. And then middle of the funnel content is more specific. And then bottom of the funnel content is really around the specific project and how to do something with that project or with that offering. And that type of inbound approach works. Web 2, Web 3, it doesn't matter. It just works really, really well because it meets the user where they are. A lot of these users, for example, you bring up the Mega ETH example. They may not
Mhm.
know about Avail yet, but they're interested in Mega ETH. And so just meet them where they are and
Yep,
provide content that meets their needs. That builds trust. And at some point, they're going to be curious, hey, this content that you created on Mega ETH, tell us about your project. And then
for
that
sure.
kind of introduces them and gets them in your funnel. And I think
Yep.
that's great. It meets the developer where they are. I think
I
that's the
was
key.
um, was talking to I was talking to someone in Lobster DAO chat. This Lobster DAO chat, like the OG Telegram chat since I think 2018 or so. A lot of people, I think some 17,000 people. Stanny from Lens is very active. A lot of people are active there. And I was just having this conversation about some other project on how they're building, this narrative. And then someone DM me and they're like, "Oh yeah, I wanted to get in touch with Avail team. I didn't know how to get in touch, but I saw you in the Lobster Out chat. Do you want to talk about what I'm building?" And I'm like, "Sure, that's what it is." And he's like, "Yeah, you got a really great knowledge on how you can do this. Would you give me feedback on this?" And then we are trying to integrate Avail with it. And I'm like, "Okay, for sure."
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, Naruto, this has been such a just helpful conversation. You bring a ton of knowledge in terms of developer marketing that I think the audience will be very appreciative of and be able to apply immediately in their work as they develop, as they, aim to meet developers' needs and grow, their own developer ecosystems. Any last things you want to say about that
Mhm.
specifically or about Avail?
Um, I would say that if you're in a DevRel position, it's a very tough job. I realize it because I work in it, but there are a lot of things that can be done. If you're a dev slash builder, I think this is the best time to build something because, the market is a little bit down. There's tariffs, there's a lot of fear, but it also gives you time to build more and more actual good stuff. So, the whole idea is like, do not be in a doomsday kind of mode, like, oh yeah, nothing's going to work out. I think a lot of things are going to work out. And if you're ever building on Avail, I can support you with anything you want, marketing. I'll be your DevRel. I'll be your personal DevRel if you build on Avail. And that's my biggest pitch.
You heard it here, folks. If you want to build and partner with Avail, Naruto will be your person. He will be there for you, and that white glove support that he talked about earlier. That's not a joke. That's serious. And you'll get the support that you need. Well, Naruto, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. This has been so fun and so instructive. Um, thank you.
Thanks a lot.